The storm tore across the darkened cliffs as Elara's voice trembled with regret. Her spell shattered the night, leaving sparks of crimson fire burning in the air. Dorian said, "You've betrayed me again, and this time there is no return." His words cracked through the chaos like thunder, piercing her heart deeper than any blade. She staggered back, guilt consuming her, her hands glowing with power she could no longer control. Kael emerged from the shadows, eyes cold, whispering, "You are mine, Elara, and nothing will sever that bond." The air trembled under the weight of magic, the ground splitting as the tide of betrayal bled into destiny. The echoes of her past sins clawed at her chest, every heartbeat a scream for forgiveness. Dorian's sword glimmered with defiance, yet his eyes betrayed the pain of love twisted into torment. The cliffs shook, the sea roared, and Elara's tears fell, not from fear but from the unbearable truth. Her love had become her greatest curse. She cried, "If redemption demands my soul, then let the storm take it." The storm subsided into silence, leaving only broken earth and shattered hearts. Elara wandered alone through the ruins, her steps heavy with shame. She whispered, "I did this. I destroyed him. I destroyed us." Her voice cracked, carried away by the night wind. The moonlight pierced through clouds, casting pale light on her soaked figure. Her gown clung to her, stained by mud and ash. Every shadow seemed to whisper her sins, reminding her of Dorian's eyes filled with betrayal. She clenched her fists, trembling, knowing that Kael's hold had twisted her destiny. The land mourned with her, its silence sharper than any scream. Yet deep inside, a fragile spark of defiance lingered. She thought of the boy who once held her hand under the stars, the man who now raised his sword against her. Her tears dried on her cheeks, replaced by a grim resolve. Redemption was no longer a choice. It was her only chance to make the pain worth something. Elara reached the edge of the ancient forest where shadows whispered like voices. Dorian waited, sword lowered but eyes guarded. She froze, heart racing, every breath reminding her of the distance carved between them. He said, "Do not come closer. Your magic has already poisoned enough." His words cut her deeper than his blade ever could. She raised her trembling hand, but lowered it, ashamed. "I never wanted this," she said, voice breaking. His jaw clenched, his silence louder than rage. For a moment, the memory of love shimmered in his eyes, quickly drowned by mistrust. The forest stirred, leaves shivering in the night breeze, as if echoing their unresolved agony. She longed to collapse into his arms, yet the wall between them loomed unshakable. The silence stretched, broken only by their unspoken longing, until the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The forest deepened, where moss and mist concealed secrets older than time. Elara stumbled upon the mentor, Alaric, seated beneath a gnarled oak, eyes glowing with quiet wisdom. He said, "Your power will destroy you if you do not learn to master it." His voice was steady, yet sorrow lingered in his tone. She whispered, "I want to change, but I do not know how." Alaric's wrinkled hands traced ancient runes carved into the bark. "Redemption demands sacrifice, not desire," he said, meeting her gaze. The words struck her like cold steel, yet a glimmer of hope stirred within her. She dropped to her knees before him, clutching her chest. The air thickened with the scent of earth and rain. In that moment, she realized the path forward would not be paved by forgiveness alone, but by enduring the weight of every sin she carried. The air shifted as a raven circled above, its cry breaking the forest's silence. Elara followed Alaric's gaze toward the horizon where dark fire rose. Kael's influence spread like poison, turning sky crimson and earth black. Alaric said, "His shadow grows, and with it, your time dwindles." Elara's chest tightened, fear clashing with determination. She whispered, "I will not let him take everything from me." Her hands glowed faintly, though the light flickered like a dying flame. Alaric watched her, sorrow and pride woven in his expression. "Then you must choose, your love or your soul," he said, words echoing with finality. The forest groaned as if mourning, roots shifting under their feet. Elara's heart pounded as she gazed at the horizon, knowing redemption would demand more than she could bear. Yet still, she stood, trembling but unbroken, her eyes fixed on the gathering storm. Dawn broke with a pale, fractured light as Elara knelt by the river's edge, her reflection warped by rippling currents. Her heart was heavy, each breath a battle against guilt. She whispered, "The water knows my sins. It sees what I cannot forgive." A memory of Dorian's voice echoed, laced with pain. She clenched her fists, trying to bury the sound, yet it rang louder with every heartbeat. The river carried fragments of ash from burned villages, a reminder of her mistake. Elara pressed her palm to the water, sparks of magic rising, but they flickered out, leaving her weaker than before. Her tears dropped, merging with the stream, as though her sorrow could be washed away. The silence weighed upon her, yet somewhere in her chest, a fragile hope stirred. Redemption seemed distant, but her determination to pursue it grew like fire from the embers of despair. The forest path narrowed, and Dorian emerged through the shadows, his armor glinting with dew. His hand rested on his sword, though his eyes softened when they met hers. Elara's chest tightened, guilt and longing colliding. He said, "Stay where you are, Elara. My trust has limits, and you have crossed them too many times." She lowered her gaze, voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. My choices were weak, not my love." His jaw tightened, his silence more punishing than any words. For a fleeting moment, the forest stilled, as though the world itself waited for reconciliation. She wanted to close the distance, to reach for him, but fear of rejection chained her to the earth. His knuckles whitened around the sword, but his lips trembled with words he refused to speak. Between them lay a canyon carved by betrayal, yet bridged by a love neither could bury. A sudden rustle broke the silence as Rowan, the sidekick, appeared carrying a satchel of herbs and charms. His grin masked the fear in his eyes, but his voice carried warmth. Rowan said, "You two look like you've seen a ghost. Lucky for you, I only bring trouble." Elara's lips curved faintly, though her heart still ached. Dorian's glare softened reluctantly, though his hand never left his weapon. Rowan plopped onto a fallen log, rummaging through his satchel. "If we're to face Kale, we'll need more than brooding stares. Magic burns brighter when hope survives." His words, though light, pierced through their despair. Elara felt a spark of courage kindle, fragile yet real. She thought perhaps his foolishness carried a wisdom no spell could conjure. The tension lifted for a heartbeat, the three of them bound, not by trust, but by a fragile thread of necessity. Far beyond their sight, Kale stood in a ruined hall lit by crimson fire. His voice dripped with malice as he whispered to unseen shadows. "They crawl toward redemption, but their path is mine to shape." His hand traced broken stone, runes glowing faintly at his touch. Flames twisted into serpents, writhing around him like loyal beasts. His eyes glowed darker, filled with hunger for power and possession. A faint echo of Elara's name lingered on his lips, spoken like a curse. He turned toward the window, where the horizon burned with red light. "Her soul belongs to me," he muttered, the words etched in venom. The shadows shivered, answering his call with whispers of war. With every flicker of flame, his ambition consumed him further. The ruined hall trembled, as though the stones themselves feared what his darkness would unleash upon the world. Night fell as Elara dreamed of a memory carved deep into her soul. The meadow bloomed with wildflowers, untouched by war. Dorian's younger self held her hand, their laughter rising into the sky. He whispered, "Promise me, Elara, no matter what comes, you'll never walk away." Her heart swelled, and she answered, "I will never let you go." The vision blurred, melting into fire and smoke. The meadow wilted, their clasped hands torn apart by shadows. She reached for him, but the darkness dragged him away. She woke with a gasp, the dream lingering like a wound. Tears burned her eyes as the stars shimmered above, indifferent and eternal. She pressed her palm to her chest, whispering, I broke my promise, but I will not break again. The night carried her vow, fragile yet resolute, into the silence of destiny waiting ahead. Dusk bled through the forest as Elara and Dorian reached a mossy chapel ruin. The air smelled of rain and iron, heavy with unsaid things. Dorian said, one step more and I forget everything we were. His voice shook like a blade held too long. Elara steadied her breath, gripping the cracked stone for courage. She said, do not forget, only forgive what truth reveals. Leaves shivered, as if fate exhaled between them. He lowered his sword, not in surrender, but in aching memory. The ruin held the echo of a vow never spoken aloud. Elara reached out, stopping just shy of his gauntlet. She said, if I fail again, end this with mercy. His eyes warmed, then cooled, like steel passing through flame. The chapel darkened, and with it, the last safe corner of their doubt. Wind split with a hiss as Kale's shadow crashed the grove in a wave of red fire. Roots curled and blackened under his will, hunger thrumming in the soil. Kale said, kneel, Elara, and the world will stop screaming. His laugh cracked like burnt glass. Dorian stepped forward, shield raised, rage bridled by duty. Elara drew a circle of light, sparks biting her palms. She said, I will not be your echo again. The grove flared, then dimmed, as if choosing a side. Kale pressed, each gesture a chain closing on her throat. Dorian said, stand behind me, but she refused and held her line. The circle brightened, a fragile moon against a devouring night. Somewhere, a branch snapped like a warning too late to save. Before dawn, Alaric prepared a chalk ring beside a mirror-still pond. He placed iron nails and salt, each a hinge for dangerous mercy. Alaric said, name your guilt, then bind it, or it will bind you. His tone held no rescue, only road. Elara tasted ash, as she spoke of lies, power, and a kiss that broke a kingdom. The pond trembled, reflecting a sky that would not bless her yet. Alaric cut the air with a reed blade, drawing light into a knot. He said, this spell spares no cowardice. She set her hands over the knot, heat threading her bones. The knot fought, then softened, and pain rang like a bell in her chest. She said, I accept the debt and the price. Dawn answered with a thin, brave gold. Rowan burst through ferns, hair full of burrs, grin stitched over panic. He flipped a tin charm that hummed like a caged bee. Rowan said, please applaud quietly when I save your lives. A red flare leapt from the trees, hunting the salt ring. He pitched the charm, and a dome of sound folded the blast inward. The shock thudded like a giant heartbeat, then dispersed into harmless sparks. Elara blinked, caught between relief and laughter. Dorian said, you reckless saint, but his eyes softened with respect. Rowan bowed to the pond, as if thanked by water. He said, hope is louder when it hums. The forest exhaled, and even the birds dared a note. Small courage, bright as flint, felt suddenly like a map. Mist rolled from the marsh path, shaping a figure carved from memory. Lysander stepped into view, eyes bright with ruin and yearning. Dorian's breath shortened, history clashing with steel. Lysander said, I came to end him, or to end me, whichever mercy arrives first. Elara steadied, heart tugged by old kindness and fresh dread. He wore honor like a cracked mirror, reflecting both night and dawn. Dorian said, choose a side and bear it without poetry. The marsh hissed, swallowing the space between choices. Lysander looked to Elara, and guilt drifted like smoke across his face. He said, your path asks for blood. Let mine pay the toll. The mist thickened, and the road divided, each turn a wound, waiting to open. The forest clearing swayed under a pale sky as Elara stood before Dorian, her voice breaking with the weight of confession. She said, I carried secrets that poisoned what we once had. His eyes narrowed, torn between anger and grief. Dorian said, You let your silence wound us more than any blade. The air hung heavy, every breath pulling them farther apart. Elara reached out, but his step backward shattered her courage. Her tears fell onto the soil, merging with roots that twisted like chains. She whispered, I cannot undo the past, but I can fight for the truth now. His hand tightened on the hilt of his sword, yet his trembling betrayed the heart beneath. Shadows stretched across them, as if fate itself judged their divide. The silence after her words was colder than the steel between them. Within the ruins of a chapel drowned in ivy, Kale's voice echoed as he faced Lysander. Kale said, Your weakness is the chain that binds you. Embrace it, and I'll make you whole again. Lysander's eyes flickered, pain and temptation warring in their depths. He clenched his fists, shaking, as if each breath was a betrayal. Kale smirked, crimson light casting him as both savior and curse. Shadows curled like serpents at his feet. Lysander said, I wanted redemption, but you offer only chains. Kale stepped closer, whispering like poison, chains are all love ever gave you. The ruined walls trembled as the fire spread, crawling along stone. Lysander's face twisted, torn between loyalty and ruin. His silence became its own answer, and the chapel groaned with the weight of his choice. The moon unveiled itself from storm clouds as a figure stepped into the camp. It was Selene, the shapeshifter, her form shifting until her face settled into calm beauty. Elara stiffened, unease flickering through her veins. Selene said, You need me, though trust is your enemy. Her tone dripped with confidence, her smile unreadable. Dorian's hand tightened on his weapon, suspicion burning in his eyes. Rowan muttered, I trust her as much as I trust a coin tossed into fire. Elara studied Selene, seeing both salvation and betrayal. Selene's gaze lingered, like she carried truths too sharp to reveal. She whispered, I walk both worlds, and without me you'll fall to his. Her words unsettled the air, weaving uncertainty like a curse. In the silence, even the fire seemed to watch. The marsh quivered as Elara and Lysander met once more, the air thick with memory. His voice broke, rough with regret. Lysander said, I loved you, yet I chose ruin. Her heart twisted, both drawn to him and repelled by the darkness in his gaze. She whispered, You shattered more than kingdoms, you shattered me. He stepped closer, rain slicking his scarred cheek. For a moment, he was the man she once knew, fragile and lost. Dorian appeared at her side, blade gleaming with resolve. His voice was hard. Stay away, Lysander, or redemption will bury you before love can. The marsh groaned, as if echoing the gravity of choice. Lysander's hand shook, torn between surrender and defiance. The past and present collided, bleeding into silence that felt like war. Night deepened as betrayal struck like a knife. Selene shifted form, revealing her allegiance with Kale. Her laugh was sharp as steel, slicing through the campfire glow. Elara's breath caught, fury and disbelief entwined. Rowan cursed, scrambling to shield the circle of chalk and herbs. Dorian roared, lunging forward, but shadows wrapped around them, forcing him back. Selene said, You trusted me, and that was your undoing. Her eyes gleamed with cruel triumph. Elara cried, You gave us hope only to poison it. The fire erupted, casting long distorted shadows against the trees. Alaric appeared from the mist, staff glowing faintly. His voice thundered, The truth always unmasks itself, no matter how deep the deception. The betrayal carved a wound deeper than blades, sealing their fates in blood and flame. The storm muted to a hush as Elara traced the runes Alaric left upon the altar stone. The glyphs pulsed like a heartbeat that was not hers. She said, This power is not a curse, it is a vow. The air tightened, and the rune pattern mirrored the scar on her palm. Dorian stepped closer, breath hitching at the glow. He said, What vow binds you to him? The altar shivered, spilling shards of memory like light through water. Kale's voice echoed from the stone, a whisper hooked with hunger. He said, Your magic was forged from love, and I drank from it. Elara reeled, seeing the night of betrayal recast as theft. She said, "You did not corrupt me. You siphoned me." The truth rose like dawn, fierce and unforgiving. Her power hinged on a bond meant to heal, twisted into a chain by a thief of hearts. Wind combed the grass as Dorian studied, the prophecy etched in iron leaf. The letters shifted, revealing a name he knew as his own. He said, "The shield is not meant to guard. It is meant to break the chain." Elara held steadier now, the altar's light dimming to a promise. He touched the iron leaf, and heat flared beneath his skin. He said, "I was forged beside you, not behind you." The ground hummed, aligning to a cadence older than war. Rowan whistled under his breath, awe softening his grin. He said, "Then the blade is not steel at all. It is a choice." Dorian lifted his gaze, armor breathing with him like a living thing. He said, "I stand at your side, not your shadow." The prophecy uncurled, and the future looked back with open eyes. Celine stepped from the birch shadows, face bare of mischief and masks. Her eyes held a bruise the world could not see. She said, "I served Kale because my name was shackled to his breath." The birches whispered like confessors in white robes. Elara steadied, suspicion and pity threading a fragile braid. Celine unpinned a glyph from her throat, and the air sighed. She said, "He bound me with your stolen vow. Break it, and I will break him." Dorian's hand paused on his hilt, measuring risk against need. He said, "If you lie, I will know." She nodded, grief yielding to resolve like ice to spring. The grove listened as if judgment lived in leaf and bark. Choice hovered, sharp as a moonlit blade, and mercy learned a new shape. Alaric arrived with the slow gravity of tides, staff dim as if morning dawn. He drew a circle in ash and salt, then set his palm upon the earth. He said, "Every gate asks a price. I will pay the first to spare you the last." Elara shook her head, but his smile was a quiet bridge. He whispered words that tasted like winter and bread. The ground opened into a silver seam, revealing the vow's true knot. Dorian said, "Do not trade your light for ours." Alaric laughed softly, the sound frayed with years. He said, "I keep nothing I cannot teach you to carry." The seam swallowed the light from his staff, leaving his eyes bright and emptying. He sagged, yet stood, and the gate held for them alone. The gate breathed as if alive, and the prophecy finished its sentence with a blade. Celine read the last line, voice unsteady. She said, "Redemption demands the heart that forged the vow to be unmade or remade." Silence fell so deep it rang. Elara looked to Dorian, love and terror braided tight. She said, "If I yield my magic, I forget you. If I keep it, I lose you to him." Dorian stepped into the circle, shoulders squared against fate. He said, "Let me bear the break. I was forged beside you." The knot tightened, waiting for a name to fall. Rowan's whisper passed like prayer through wind. He said, "Choose the path you can carry awake." Elara lifted her palm, and the gate brightened, asking for nothing less than everything. The battlefield cracked open as Kale unleashed fire across the horizon, the sky bleeding crimson against the last breath of twilight. Elara staggered beneath the surge, her veins burning with the weight of stolen vows. Kale roared, "Your soul is mine, forged in chains you cannot sever." His voice shook the air like thunder. Dorian charged forward, shield raised, fury glowing in his eyes. He said, "She belongs to no one but her own choice." Sparks ignited where steel clashed against shadow, every strike echoing like a drumbeat of doom. Rowan darted through the chaos, hurling charms that burst with fragile light. Elara cried, "No, this ends with me," her voice splitting the storm. The ground trembled, flame and wind wrestling as fate tightened its grip. All paths converged on this moment where love, power, and ruin burned as one. The storm of battle bent toward Elara, her magic awakening like a sleeping star. She screamed, "You cannot steal what was never yours," and the ground split with white fire. Her tears streamed, mingling grief with strength. Dorian shielded her from the collapsing rubble, his body braced as stone rained around them. He said, "I will not let this power consume you." Kale smirked, his eyes cruel. She was mine the moment she chose to spare. The words carved wounds deeper than his fire. Elara's chest heaved as she pressed her palms together, summoning light to drown the red. The air crackled, charged with a power ancient and raw. For the first time she embraced the pain, turning it into something greater. The night itself seemed to pause, waiting for her to decide which side of herself she would keep alive. Lightning clawed the sky as steel and shadow collided. Dorian fought Kale directly, every strike carrying both rage and love. Their swords clashed, ringing like thunder in the bones of the earth. Kale hissed, "You fight for a ghost of trust," his cloak flaring with fire. Dorian gritted his teeth. "I fight for her truth, not her past." Sparks flew, raining light on the ruined field. Elara stood behind them, summoning a protective ward that rippled like glass across the air. Rowan shouted, "Hold the line," as his charm scattered bursts of defiance. The storm gathered, all colors of fire swirling into one unbearable storm. Elara's body shook, every ounce of her power bleeding into the fragile barrier. She whispered, "If this is the cost, let me pay it." The battle raged, carving destiny in ash and flame. Through smoke, Lysander emerged, his face torn between ruin and redemption. His voice cracked like glass. "I cannot let him win, even if I must fall with him." Elara gasped, memories flooding of love lost and twisted. Dorian stood tense, blade ready, torn by brotherhood and betrayal. Kale sneered, "You would betray me now, broken hero?" Lysander raised his hand, light and shadow dueling in his palm. He said, "I betray no one but myself." The air fractured as his spell split the battlefield, forcing Kale back a step. Elara's tears shimmered, torn between rage and hope. She whispered, "Find your way back, Lysander." His eyes burned with conflict, yet his stance was clear. For a heartbeat, the tide shifted, not by power alone, but by a wounded man daring to choose his soul again. The storm climaxed in a roar as Elara stepped into the center of the battlefield, her body trembling with unbearable power. She cried, "This is my vow, and I will break it with love, not fear." The ground surged, fissures glowing like veins of starlight. Kale lunged, but Dorian blocked, their steel screaming under impact. Lysander flung his last spell, burning his strength away. Rowan's voice cracked, "Now, Elara, now." Her hands erupted with blinding light, swallowing shadow and flame alike. Her voice echoed across earth and sky. "I am no one's prisoner. My soul is my own." The battlefield convulsed, light colliding with darkness in a final terrible bloom. Silence followed, deep and absolute, as if the world itself bowed to her choice. The fate of all lay hanging in the stillness after her cry. Dawn rose soft and trembling over the broken field, and the silence felt like breath after drowning. Elara stood where the light first touched, her hands raw, her eyes steady. Dorian stepped beside her, armor dulled by ash, gaze bright with stubborn hope. He said, "You chose love, and you live." She whispered, "I chose truth, and it spared us." Wind carried the smell of rain and stone, washing the night from their skin. Rowan limped over, grinning like a bruise that learned to smile. He said, "If anyone asks, I planned all of that." Laughter cracked the grief, small and holy. The world did not cheer, but it listened. Elara turned to the horizon where the storm had been. She said, "What we broke, we will mend." The light agreed, climbing the sky like a promise. They carried their wounded to the river, where the water ran clear again. Alaric traced a blessing in the air, his hands shaking from spent light. He said, "The gate closed, but its lesson remains." Elara bowed her head, not in defeat, but in thanks. Dorian knelt to rinse blood from his gauntlet. and the stain loosened like a memory let go. Celine kept her distance, eyes shadowed by the cost of choice. She said, "I broke the bond, but not the debt." Rowan pressed a charm into her palm and winked. He said, "Then pay it forward." The river answered with a bright ripple, as if approving their small mercy. The day widened, and grief learned to breathe without burning. Among the birches, Lysander stood where the mist thinned to light. He would not meet Elara's eyes at first, then he did, and the truth hurt less. He said, "I could not outrun what I became, but I stepped toward what I might be." She nodded, a quiet blessing in the shape of breath. Dorian watched, jaw hard, then loosened by choice. He said, "Walk a clean mile, then another." Rowan muttered, "And right when you get there." A fragile humor stitched the moment. Celine spoke softly, "Redemption is not a door, it is the road itself." Leaves answered with a silver murmur. Lysander turned toward the long path, and for once, the past did not pull. The village square lay cracked but standing, like a heart that still knew how to beat. People gathered, faces wary and bright with relief. Elara raised her hands not to dazzle but to heal. She said words that felt like weaving, and light stitched stone to stone. Dorian organized the work with a soldier's grace and a lover's care. He said together, "And no one is left behind." Children laughed at Rowan's clumsy juggling, joy tripping over grief and landing on its feet. Celine repaired a roof with quiet skill, each nail a prayer for fewer masks. Alaric rested, watching hope take root without magic. The square changed color as the sun climbed, and the day felt held. At dusk, the cliffs faced a quiet sea that remembered thunder and chose calm. Elara and Dorian stood where they first broke, and finally mended. He said, "I cannot promise no storms, only that I will stand in them with you." She smiled, a soft vow stitched to breath. She said, "If I falter, hold me to the truth we bled for." The tide moved like a slow heartbeat, patient and sure. Far behind, voices carried from the village, not urgent, just alive. Rowan whooped somewhere, turning work into music. Celinen's laugh joined, rare and unguarded. Alaric hummed a tune that the wind remembered. Elara leaned into Dorian, and the horizon kept their secret. The night arrived gentle, and the last light lingered like grace.